Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick and welcome to Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening Woman. HER is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. And who is the awakening woman? She's the woman who's seeking a greater possibility in her reality and she's looking for solutions. She knows being awakened is not a lofty ideal, but a necessity. If she can transform herself, she can change the world. Her conversations will introduce you to talented women who will speak to your spirituality, sensuality, and soul. They share their stories and explain how they are in service to the world. So let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. I started Her Conversations as a way of speaking to women whose work fascinates me and facilitates my growth, in the belief that this would also do the same for others. There's also another aspect that I intend to introduce, and today's episode signals the start of that. Like many other people, I have experiences and perspectives that have severely challenged me. Of course, all of those have been instrumental in forming who I am today and how I view the world. However, many of those events hold some stigma and as a result are never openly discussed. The thing about secrets is that they fester and they create within us a turbulence that can often hamper our lives. Maybe we're misunderstood, we have addictions, or continually sabotage our own development. So periodically there will be an episode that is more of a discussion where me and my guests will open up about a shared experience. Maybe the topic will mirror your life or that of somebody you know, or maybe it will simply bring a new understanding to something that has not been part of your story. So with all that being said, on to this week's episode. I'm talking to my good friend Donna Owindi about the death of a parent and how it affected our individual lives. Donna's father passed in January of 2016 and my mother passed in August of the same year. So before we get into the conversation itself, we begin by Donna talking about how we met.
I remember I was on Twitter and I was thinking about just starting my podcast, and I was thinking I need someone to get on my interview. And then there's this guy, his name is Mike. He works for Apple, and somehow we were following some guy, I think it was Jay Kubasek or something of the sort. Mm-hmm. And he was tweeting and then we were following him, he was following us. And then somehow we were retweeting some of his stuff. And then I followed you and I liked your music. And then I was like, hey, would you like to be on my podcast? And then you were like, then you said yes. And then from there, I guess we say the rest is history. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because actually, it's funny because when I met you, I think I hadn't really heard about the law of attraction at that time. And it hadn't been something that I had thought about or anything like that. I just knew that there's a power in doing, like, if you want something, dress for the part or something. It was just something that I knew within me, but I never knew that there was a word for it. So then when I met you and then I listened to your song, I realized that we, like, somehow there are things that you in your lyrics, like there's some things that you said, like, girl, why you want to hide? You've been asking for this all your life. So that was something that really resonated with me. And then we talked, and then before we had the podcast, because we're just going through testing the system and everything. And then I realized, like, we're so similar in so many things. And then then a friendship just grew naturally. Basically, yeah. So the rest, as we say, is history.
Isn't it, really? And what's been interesting as well is how there's been so many parallels in our lives, really, about kind of the work that we do, or the work and the development that we're going through, and then also like pivotal moments in our lives. And you know, one of the reasons that we're speaking today is because last year, 2016, we both experienced loss of a parent. And so what's been helpful for each of us, I feel, is that we've been able to support each other and understand where each person might be, not only after the event, but leading up to. And, you know, even though our parents had very different conditions that ultimately took their lives, there's a point in time where you're very much aware that they're going to die at some point. You don't know exactly the day. Sometimes it feels like it's going to be much sooner than it is, and then they find a lease of life, and it kind of they live a little bit longer, and it's a real, for want of a better phrase, it's a cliche, but it's true, a real roller coaster of emotions. You're tensing yourself up for the inevitable, and then they don't, and then there's relief, but at the back of your head, there's still very much an awareness that it's going to happen anyway, and it's about putting affairs in order in terms of legalese maybe, but also then putting your emotional affairs in order with the parent, and then reconciling how you're going to be on the other side of things. I mean, I wanted you to just kind of speak on how you felt that you were building yourself up leading up to the point that your dad had his final days.
Well, a lot happened in between his final days, but I remember there was an incident because I just believed he would get better. And one thing that really stuck with me was, like, I had no idea how bad it was. And when I found out how bad it was, it shook me. But at the same time, my parents both knew and I didn't know. So that was hard because I got to find out later. But then leading up to it, what I used to do was I would try and accept it, because at the end of the day, life, we can control our lives. But then when it comes to other people's well-being, the most important thing is trying to make them feel better, to make them feel loved, to make them feel heard, to ask them what they need. Because I remember my dad had like some requests, like he wanted a new phone and he wanted something new. Like he just wanted new stuff. Like he'd go to the shop and just buy him something just to make him feel better, because it's like, in a way, it was like he knew he was going. So it was kind of like he just wanted stuff to say that he had it, you know, not necessarily. So basically what we used to do was just make his favorite food, talk to him, and try and keep up with him when he was conscious, because sometimes he'd go in and out of consciousness, and it was hard to keep a conversation with him, because sometimes you talk to him and he would be present, and then all of a sudden he'd be so tired. Like it came a point where he was so tired he couldn't even open his eyes anymore. And so leading up to that, and I remember the last time I had a conversation with him on the phone, he was so exhausted, and all I could do was just try my best to not cry and to not show him that I knew that it was coming. And I remember leading up to the end, because there's some things it came a point he couldn't even speak. So I remember I Googled the last stages of cancer, and everything just came up. Everything that he was going through came up, and that's when I knew the answer to the question that I didn't want to know the answer for. And all I could do was just sit down and be in gratitude that I got to spend time with him. And I just hoped that he would not be alone when the time came. So leading up to that, I would say, how did I prepare myself was I just meditated a lot and tried to be as present as possible and tried to be as gentle as possible, because when people transition, sometimes even if they know the truth, sometimes they may be scared because maybe they don't know what's on the other side. But I feel because my dad was so in and out of consciousness for such a long time, that I think I feel that his transition was seamless. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that as well. I think from my point of view, with my mum, she'd had various different health concerns for years anyway. So she'd lived with mental illnesses of varying degrees pretty much all of my life. So it was that was just something that we had to work out how to manage between a family. But it was towards the last 2 years where there was a marked decline. I mean, as she got older, then there were things like diabetes and other, she had to have an operation on her heart. But even though she was having these major operations and things continually happening, she was still battling on. I could see how much of a battler she was. But it wasn't until the last year or so, one Christmas, 2015, where she was in a coma for a couple of weeks, and it wasn't, that didn't really make sense. None of the medical professionals could work out what it was, and she came out of that. And then in about the February of the year following, she went through that situation again. And that's when, there was a lot of this looks like she's declining now, because also her motor skills started to go down as well. She couldn't walk, she couldn't talk so much. She needed assistance pretty much all the time. And it was a real gradual of the last 18 months, 2 years, 18 months, where it was a slow decline. There'd be a little up, but you could tell that we were kind of reaching to the point where she was kind of losing all aspects of her personality. I didn't really know, to be honest. I could see that there was life leaving her. And for one reason or another, throughout my life, there's usually been some sort of death that I've had to, some sort of funeral that I've had to go to, usually every 5 or 6 years, from the time that I was about 4 years old, starting with my dad and then friends. So there's a death for me has always been something that happens. I've been to probably more funerals than I should have in my lifetime at this age in my life. Some people don't experience any death around them until they're in their 50s or 60s. So also as a result of that, I'm used to seeing people's bodies when they're passed. It's not a new thing to me to see someone passed and see what their body looks like when they're passed. The evening before she passed, there was a lot of family in her hospital room. And then with that last day, it was me, her last night and morning, it was me and my sister-in-law who sat with her and just kind of stayed with her, and she passed in the morning. And what I remember about that is when she was literally taking her last breath, there was no way of, you couldn't really tell when the last one was. She just slipped away. And then, if you see a lot of dramatic things on TV, it's like this gasping and reaching and all this kind of amateur dramatics and things like that. So it wasn't that at all. There was a period of time during the night where her breathing got really laboured. And by having my sister-in-law there, who is a nurse, so she is kind of used to seeing what happens to the body literally minute by minute when they're absolutely deteriorating and they're leaving their body. So in the morning, you could see that you could see the soul of her depart out of the body as well. So for us, we just sat with her. I had my phone and I put on Spotify playlist with piano music, and we just played it, and we just sat with her, and we just allowed her to leave, release, whatever it was. It was to the point where when it happens, you're sitting there and going, okay, and because I had that leading up so many times, and like I said, I've had so many instances of death over my life, and it was always with my mom's health concerns. It was like for rightly or wrongly, I was always reminded that my mum was going to die from a very early age. It was always pointed out to me, your mum's going to die, your mum's going to die. And yet over the years, it would be always different people. It would be like friends, and like friends when I was 12, 15, 20, 29, friends that were my age that were dying, and not my mum, who was the one that was quote unquote ill. So I had a lot of trepidation about how I would be when that happened, particularly because I'd then seen close friends lose their parents and then what it had done to them. So I was like, okay, my mum's going to die, and then I'm going to go through this this period of spin out. I wasn't really looking forward to that. Of course, I'm not looking forward to her passing, but I'm not looking forward to spin out. But one of the ways that I think I'd managed to have some sort of context was I'd really, over the years, gotten into listening to especially Abraham Hicks. And they have a very, Abraham Hicks is a very interesting perspective on what happens when you die. They don't call it death and dying. They're not morbid about it. It's about you transition. The soul leaves your body and you become one again. You're just not available physically. So I'd started, it had taken me a while to kind of get my head around that. And I even remember years beforehand, someone saying to me in a really flippant way as well that, you know, and she was talking about her own mother. She's like, do you know what, when my mom dies, I'll be, you know, I'll get over it in about 2 days. And I think, I know at one point, I'm just like, you crazy. So, say something like that. I didn't have a spin out. And I've kind of spent the last year looking over my shoulder, thinking, I've not spun out. It doesn't mean that I don't have moments where I'm contemplating, when I'm communicating with her, but I didn't have this kind of, I don't know whatever, you know, the weeping and the wailing and the throwing down. And this doesn't mean that I'm not grieving my mom. It's just that my experience of it is so different. And what I'd like to know is, as someone who has like a real spiritual belief yourself, how has your experience of this grieving period differed from what you thought you were going to go through, or what is expected of you should be this because this has happened to you? Because there's an expectation.
That's true. Because I remember when my dad passed, like everyone just told me to let go, and that like some people would be like, oh, don't cry or don't do this, or basically I think the most annoying thing was when people told me I need to be strong for my mom, because it's like my mom was the only one who had lost my dad, and I had lost my dad as well. And that, I think for me, maybe the grieving was a bit easier, because when someone's terminally ill, you expect them to pass on. So in a way, you're going through grief when the person is alive, because you're already, the magnitude of that loss that's going to happen, you don't know what it's going to be like, but then you savor the moments because you know it's going to happen. Because it's different when someone suddenly passes on, like with a heart attack or a car crash or something, because those are tragic deaths because you did not see it coming. But then for me, because I saw it coming and I felt it, I knew it was happening. So for me, actually, because I'd been told that I needed to be strong for my mom, the funeral was in January, and I did not give myself permission to grieve, because I felt like I had been told that I have to be strong for my mom. So in a way, I kind of shut down all emotion and everything. And I was just functioning at this point, because at that time my mom was just out of it. She was depressed. She wasn't in her head. She was just not there. So then one night I had a talk with Alexis, and my dad came through, and he said that I need to, that I've not really grieved. And it made me feel kind of like ashamed, that basically the feelings that I got was like, I felt ashamed to grieve, like I was not allowed to do it. So then that night, after talking to Alexis, I went home, And then all the feelings, everything just came. And I remember I just had a really good cry. And I don't even know how long it was. But then I let it all out. And that was the first time. And that was probably in March. And the funeral was in January. So that was the first time that I actually had that really good cry and thought about everything just came flooding, and everything that I had to do during the funeral and leading up to that. So what I did that was one way that when I finally released the grief, I realized I felt better. But then at some point, it also got too much because I couldn't even go to my dad's grave at all, because I kept seeing the images of his casket being lowered. Because actually I would have preferred if we had a cremation, but then because of traditions and things like that, like people kind of convinced my mom that it was inappropriate. So but anyway, so what I did was being still and allowing those feelings to come when they came. And there were days when I didn't even want to wake up, because when I remembered what happened and how it was, I even sometimes looked at my mom and I was like, how did we survive through all that stuff? And of course, there were times when I was angry because of the diagnosis as well. And there are times when I was angry because I wasn't told how bad it was until I found it out myself. So I felt like if we had been honest about the whole thing, it would have made it easier. But I never actually felt, yes, that he's not physically here, but I didn't feel that missing. I can't explain it, but I didn't miss him, because I knew that he was not here in his physical body. But I remember the hardest part was after the funeral, when everyone left, and because my mom was really tired, and I decided to help her clean her room, and I found all his stuff around. That was so profound, because I found his spectacles, I found some of his notes and everything. So everything that he touched all of a sudden had more significance, especially the little notes that he wrote. So that made me realize that it doesn't matter what you have, because at the end of the day, you're going to leave it all behind. You're not going to carry your spectacles with you, because no one really cares on the other side if you can see or not, because you're in your spirit form. But yeah, it was just that moment of knowing that all these things that we deem important, they actually aren't, And so I had to take myself out of the situation. Like when I didn't feel like talking to anyone, I would just not talk to anyone. But then I would reach out to those people whom I knew would understand what I'm feeling. Because the thing that pissed me off actually during the grieving period is when people were telling me, like some people are saying, you need to hold on to Jesus. And I was really annoyed because I don't really sit down and shout to the rooftops and yeah, I'm a spiritual person, but I'm not going to be, so for someone to judge me and tell me to hold on to Jesus, not really knowing what my spiritual background is, it's like, yes, you can hold on, but the fact is we do live in this physical body and our minds work in a different way. So sometimes we don't need people to judge us. We just need people to hold our hands. And even if we know that we don't feel okay, just to tell us that, yes, just go through it. But when people say, don't cry, when people say, don't get angry, don't do this and that, it's like, how do you expect someone to heal? That's why you may find people who've had people pass on 20 years later and they're still grieving because they haven't gotten over it. Because they've been told, you cannot do this. You must be this. You must be strong. You must be. But what if I just don't want to be? And the thing is, if I'm strong for my mom, who's going to be strong for me? So I have to be strong for myself. And that's one thing that I realized, because if I'm not strong for myself, I cannot be there for anyone else. So I have to take care of myself first. And the first thing I did to take care of myself was send my mom away for a week, because I felt that because we're grieving, both of us are grieving, and I didn't feel it was a good environment for us to be in the same environment together, because then we would keep talking about my dad, which is not a bad thing. But if we're in that, because, misery loves company. So then I didn't want to be sucked into that space of, like it's the end of the world and everything, because I knew at some point I had to get back to normalcy, whatever that means. So I sent my mom away, and I made sure that she had a yoga instructor to help her, work with her almost every day, because that's what she needed. She just needed time on her own, because she had never taken a holiday since when my dad was sick or anything like that. So she had a yoga instructor who helped her. And because I felt like what she needed to do was just to breathe. And it did help, because when she came back, she was feeling a little bit better. And I felt like our relationship was getting better, that it wasn't that, because I felt like when my dad passed on, I felt like I was kind of like her substitute husband and confidant and all that stuff. Like whenever she had problems or things like that, she would tell me, which made me feel uncomfortable, because there's certain things I did not want to know, So then it's kind of like our relationship. There was no what can I say? There were no boundaries in a way, which made me feel so uncomfortable. So by her going away, we started to establish our own boundaries for us to be careful and respectful to each other's way of grieving. Because I told my mom, listen, if you're not able to do something, please just let me know instead of lashing out, because then that way I can help you. Because there are days when I don't feel good as well, but I can for you, I can, step up. There's no problem. So then it kind of improved our communication as well. And there are so many things that happen. But one thing that really helped me the most is just going into deep meditation, because there's sometimes when you want to cry, but because you've been told not to, you stop yourself. But then when you're in that form of meditation and you're thinking, and you're not thinking, like you've shut down your mind and you're just by yourself, then those feelings resurface. And sometimes it's hard, but when I let them flow, after that, I just feel like I had like a spiritual shower or something, like a spiritual cleansing, because then after that, I feel much clearer. And it's through meditation that I was able to stop seeing my dad. Like, because each time I used to close my eyes, I used to see the casket. So I started through that. I finally managed to get rid of that thing, and I was able to go to the grave without fear, without that thing. Like, because then I remembered that was just his body. It wasn't him, and his body served its purpose. And now it was there, just there. But then I had to remember that my dad he is present, and he still exists, but not in a way that we here down here understand. And I think in a way, my dad passing made me strong in a way that I'm trying I listen to my intuition more, and I'm trying to be more confident in that, because I used to doubt myself a lot when things used to happen. There was one day, I think maybe it was a few days after the funeral, where I had a dream. Like, he was there and he was asking me, why am I crying? And then I remember he was there, and I put my head on his lap, and I think he just held my head or something, and I just cried, and I woke up and I was like, oh my God, that was so real. It was so real. It's just an experience, because everyone's grieving is different. So no one should ever tell anyone how they should grieve, because they do not know the pain or the magnitude of what people went through before, if someone was ill or whatever. So you should just be respectful and say, listen, I respect that. Some of my friends, they was like, listen, I won't lie to you. I don't know what to say, but all I can tell you is that I'm praying for you. And that to me meant the world, because they're not trying to pretend that they feel what I'm feeling. They're just being honest about it. And that's what I like about my inner circle, my friend circle, is that they're just honest. They're like, look, I've not been through that, so I don't know how you're feeling. I know it's hard, and from what you're telling me, but I respect that you're going through this. I don't have the words to make it better, but I'll just pray for you. And that's what people should do. When people say, I'm sorry won't bring the person back. I mean, death is part of life at the end of the day, like, because we were born, we live, and then we die. I mean, our physical body dies, but we still continue living. But on the other hand, it's very, very profound in that sense. Grieving makes you realize that you have to live. Because I remember I had this phase, and I still do, where when my dad was sick, like, I would have put crazy, what people call crazy colors. So I was like, I'm a unicorn. So I'd have purple hair or green hair or something. And that was my form of grieving, because I felt like I wasn't allowed to be myself. So why don't I just be myself? So I would just have different bright colors on my hair, not even pink or something, because it was kind of like my armor, It would remind me that, yeah, this color is to remind you that you need to live, you need to move forward. So that was kind of the process in which I was grieving, was reminding myself to show up for myself, reminding myself to walk in my truth, reminding myself to speak my truth, reminding myself to take care of me, because self-care is very important. And that's one thing through grieving that I learned the most, that if you don't take care of yourself, you'll never be healed and you'll never be whole. Because that's the thing that people always say when someone passes on. They're like, I feel incomplete, like there's something missing. I think my father loved me in a wholehearted way. But I did not feel that love. I don't know how to explain it. When someone passes on, you feel the love in a different way. And then you start to understand, and you understand, oh, I understand why they did this. I understand why they said this. I understand. So it's kind of like, it's funny that grieving kind of, if you pay attention, grieving actually wakes you up to what love actually means. And that is a beautiful thing, because I don't think we understand what love is until, not because we lose someone, until those letters that you received seem like just seeing someone's writing or seeing someone's thoughts or something. And that's why it's important for us to have to leave something behind, because we're leaving something behind, not for us, but the future generation that's coming up, the future, our future descendants and all that stuff. So it's important to leave your mark somehow, like create something. Because some of the things my dad wrote or whatever, I hold on to them, like the books he recommended, I hold on to them, because when my dad passed on is when I realized how, like, we always dismiss our parents, but I never realized how conscious he was too. Because then I looked at the book collection, and I saw there were books about feminism, there were books about spirituality, because he read we had the Mormon book, someone had given him the Hindu book as well. So we had that at home. I don't think we had the Quran. I'm not sure. I don't think we did. But he read all that stuff and about religion, about like different religions, about the system and all these things. And then I was like, I could be having all this conscious conversations with my dad, but I just did not. It was there, but I didn't see it. Because then it explained why he was always so, because sometimes he would tell me things and he'd be like, I don't think that person is a good person, or I'm not sure if this business deal that you're doing is. He'd ask me questions, and it's like, if I were you, basically he's telling me don't do it. But he would say, if I were you. And that's when I realized that, wow, it is like you really need to pay attention. And that's why I do my social detox nowadays, because I realize that we need to pay attention. We need to get out of this thing of constantly being engaged. And that's why only my inner circle has access to me, because I don't have the energy to be talking to anybody and anyone. And that's the thing also, when you're in this grieving process, only contact those people who know what you're going through and who are honest enough to tell you the truth that we don't get it, but we're here for you no matter what. One thing that I find very insulting is if you know someone died of, or someone close to you who's died or passed on because of a certain disease, please don't send them posts about, because it's like adding insult to injury, about taking care of yourself, like if to prevent this disease and all these, because it's very patronizing, because it makes that person feel like they didn't do enough, but you do not know what they were doing. And that's one thing that I saw people doing, not only to me, but to my mom, until I was like, you know what, I'm just tired of that. Just stop it. Stop it, because you don't know what we went through to lead us to this point. And it's like you're kind of telling us we didn't do our best when we went high and low researching and trying to do everything that we could. Because one thing that my mom always says is like, at least she tried everything that was available to her, so she has no regrets.
There was one thing that you said, and there's a number of things as well that I'd like to ask you about. Firstly, social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I used it in a very basic way. I didn't use social media to announce that my mum had passed, but I actually, my brother put something up and I kind of shared it. So it was in a roundabout kind of way. It wasn't my post.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen other people use it. And social media is handy because it means that you don't have to make 20 and 30 phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of the time, the people that you're connected to on, in particular, Facebook, you know, it's unlikely that you need to tell 100 people that someone close to you has died. You need to tell like your close friends, and you need to tell, you know, anyone that needs to know is within reach. Or if you can't, or you're not in the position to make that contact, then there will be someone close to you that will make that contact for you and kind of inform somebody else. How did you use your online space to inform your world of people that your dad had passed? Or did you use it at all, or did you choose not to? I wasn't wholly comfortable doing it, but I knew that a lot of people knew that I was that it was imminent, and I didn't really want to have the conversation. However, I know that I've seen it with other friends that will use it as an announcement, and then will use it as an anniversary as well. So year after year it comes, and it puts you in a hard position, because when someone stands up in front of you, which kind of what Facebook and social media is, and go, "Hey guys, I've just had this terrible thing happen to me," you don't really, you ignore it, or you can't really respond in fairness. On that, really, you know. And it doesn't give you that, you know, Facebook doesn't give you that many options. It's like, you love it, you like it, wow, you know, like an emoji isn't going to cut it when you're going through all that stuff. How did you use, as someone who works online a lot and your business is run online, how did you use social media to inform the world?
It's so funny you asked me this, because actually when my dad was ill, I used to call him my patient, because I didn't want people to know what we were going through, because I didn't want pity, and I didn't want people to come. You know, there's some people, when they know something's wrong, they don't know how to react, and they're like, "Oh my God, that's so horrible." And that makes you feel worse, because you know it's horrible, but you don't need someone to keep reminding you of that, you know? So I remember when my dad passed on, I just posted something on Twitter saying that my patient passed on and is whatever. And then someone whom I knew, and we used to actually even live together, and I considered them a friend. I'd even attended their wedding. They just chose to tweet me and tell me, "Oh, like, I'm sorry for your loss and your family." And this person had met my mom, had met my dad. And I remember feeling so disgusted and angry, because I felt like, you have my email address, you have my number, you can reach me. Why can't you send me a message, a private message or something, like, why do you have to tweet it back to me? Because the reason why I tweeted about it was because there was a time when my dad was refused to fly, and I talked about how he was treated and everything. And then because there were some people who were concerned who had been asking, but that was the only reason. But no one knew that was my dad. And when I was doing my blogs, basically I'd talk about my dad in third person, and because I didn't want people to understand what was going on, because my dad didn't want people to know at the same time, and I was respecting his wishes, so he was my patient. So actually on the day of when it happened, I started getting random messages on my Facebook, and I'm like, from people I hadn't talked to in years, and I'm like, how did they know? Then I remembered talking to my friend. Like, then I figured out who had told someone. So then this person that I knew had told people, and I was like, why did you go telling people? It's like, yeah, but you announced. But I'm like, I've never once said that it was my dad. And she was like, yeah, that's true. So I felt like, why do people have the right to tell other people? It's funny how people feel that they have the right to tell other people that that someone has passed on when they did not have an active part in your life at all for maybe 5-10 years or whatever. Yes, there are people in my life that maybe I haven't seen in years, but then we do still keep in contact, and I know where their heart is, and I know the reason why I don't post things as intimate as that is because when you've been grieving when someone's alive, and you don't want people to tell you meaningless things that just don't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, and if you think about it, like, if we just think about the decorum, can you imagine if you're in a room of 100 people and then someone just decides to, I have an announcement to make, and stand at the table and say, I just lost my dad. Like, if you think about it, like, people would just look at you like, what are you thinking? And that's the same thing. Like, when I'm thinking about Facebook and Twitter and all those things, like, that's why when I post, I try to be as, conversational as possible, so that it's not like an announcement. Because some people take it really overboard. But I feel like when someone dies or someone passes on, it's better to respect kind of like their existence and not make it like a kind of like a, because I felt I loved my dad too much to make it kind of like a spectacle. And the funny thing is, a year later after he passed on his first anniversary, is like, he wants to be remembered in some way, like he wants people to remember him. And the funny thing is, the same day his documentary was released or something, and I posted it all over, but I didn't say like who it was, but I just posted it all over. And I was like, oh, I didn't think it was a coincidence that it came around that time. So I feel like the most important thing is people need to be remembered in a dignified way. I'm not saying my dad was perfect or anything like that, but I feel that someone's life should be respected enough that the people that they felt were there and were present and had a significance in their life should have the choice to be present and should have the choice to go on, because my dad's wish basically didn't want even his funeral to be somber. He wanted it to be, and he wanted singing, and he just didn't want it to be like some spectacle. And that's the kind of man he was. So by me not announcing on social media, it was also because I wanted to respect and the time. But after 40 days is when I finally wrote a post on my blog. And then actually this year in June is when I told people actually that, the patient was actually my dad. Because I wanted people to realize that, yeah, you can look at my blog and I'm there smiling and I'm there traveling, but I have been through things, and that's just part of life, and life does go on. But when I choose to just know that everything that I share is something that I choose to share. So then people should be conscious of that. And that's the thing with social media that people forget, is that you choose to share. It's a choice to share. And there's some people who overshare and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, but this is not what I wanted. But it was your choice. Sure. It was your choice. And the only reason why I shared certain things was because I was thinking in my head, I was like, maybe someone's going through this. The first post on cancer that I wrote, I had many people write to me and say, oh, that it actually helped them understand the magnitude. Because, when October comes around, I roll my eyes because people just think that by wearing a pink ribbon that you're helping with cancer. But it's more than that. It's not about wearing a pink ribbon. It's not about, there's lots of cancer research everywhere, but it takes years before that research is released, The best thing that you can do for people with for cancer is find a way to get them, especially in places like Kenya, find a way to ensure that people have information of where their hospice is. Because when my dad was ill, we never had that option of a hospice. We didn't even know there was a hospice near where we were living, and that hospice was actually free. So in the end, my mom and I were just single-handedly taking care of my dad. Basically, my mom was there with him day, night, everything. So if it's just creating awareness of the options that people have, because people don't talk about it. And sometimes even the medicines that are available, maybe they're not even going to help. You should just have pain management. Because I remember each time he went for radiotherapy, he'd come back worse than he was. So it really made me question a lot of things. So social media should be used as a platform to create awareness and also make people think. And that's why some of my articles, when I wrote them to make people understand that cancer is something that happens, but you don't have to be an ass about it, or in the most polite way to say it, you don't have to be patronizing about it, and let these people talk to them, ask them what they need. We never got options of counseling. We never got options of going to see a psychologist. We weren't prepared of what it would do to us financially or physically, mentally, and all that stuff. And that's why I feel social media should be used as a tool to create awareness. Yes, you can post all your good things, bad things, whatever. But if you're posting this thing, make sure it's something that will help someone along the way, not bring them down. And that's why when I see some things online and I see people arguing with other people, I take a step back, because I don't have time for that. I have other things to be doing. Like I'd rather spend my time posting positive things than spend my time spreading negativity, because there's already a lot of craziness going on in the world. And if I'm able to just bring someone that piece of peace, or I would do it in a heartbeat. And that is the only reason why I was blogging anyway, to do what I did, just to inspire people to be more conscious about whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's traveling, whether it's going through grief, whether it's just being present. And actually the Thoughtful Tuesday was born out of that, because doing lifestyle in the beginning was nice, because I like sharing. I'm a sharer. But at the end of the day, then I realized, like, no, they're just things that I like to do, but they're not really things that I care about 100%. The thing that I care about is just letting that light lighting that light bulb or candle in your head to realize that, life is now. Life is the present. Life is not tomorrow. No, no, life is now, here, now.
For me, it was interesting, the reactions that I got. And most of it, I got a few messages from, I was surprised, actually, people who I didn't really have huge amounts of contact with, who would then privately contact me and just check in with me, and not even kind of just after the event, when like a year later, if I bumped into them, it was just a real, how are you doing? Are you okay? It was like you said, it was never that sorry for your loss. And I think also, if I remember, 2016 was an interesting year, because it also seemed like there was so much celebrity death going on.
True.
Friends. And there's like major big names were just leaving us, like you had Prince, you had David Bowie at the end of the year, you had George Michael, and it was just coming from left and right, really.
Yeah, it was like an avalanche.
Like I said before, I'd kind of been building up to this, listening to Abraham and understanding that the soul leaves us. And I think I've always felt that, because even when my dad died and I was 4, I was very much aware of the world around me starting to spin out of control and everyone going nuts, and me not feeling as distraught as maybe I quote unquote should have. People have said to me that my personality changed. I became very quiet and introverted as a result of that. And, you know, one of my earliest memories is of seeing a casket going down, seeing my dad's body and then seeing a casket going down. So I have that kind of imprinted in my mind, because it kept happening so frequently that there was a lot of death around me. After a while, I couldn't keep going into this situation, and even though I didn't know where it came from, I always felt that the minute that they passed on, then I was able to kind of communicate with them more. And whether it was like a friend or whether it was like, and I remember thinking it years ago when Nina Simone died, and just thinking, well, maybe I can, and it was just a thought of, just a passing thought, but then you look back on it and go, well, this passing thought is not really that far from universal truth. Of me thinking, well, maybe I can, you know, could I tap into Nina Simone's brain? Will my piano playing get that? It was this thought of maybe they sink into the soup or the fabric of what it is we're all part of, which ultimately, when we're going into our spiritual practices, is what we believe anyway. We're just kind of moving into physical and out of physical. And I remember having a conversation one time when this idea was kind of formulating more and more in my mind, about the fact that it was just like we kind of move into different aspects like water. So at one point we'll be like steam, and then we'll be more solid like ice, and then we'll be more water like steam, and all the rest of it. But I was having the conversation with the wrong person, because it just flew over their head. And then it's like, well, I don't know. I've never seen anyone. No one that's been dead has come back to me, so I don't believe it. And yet, you know, you hear of like kids that are reincarnated and then go to find their family and like knock on the door, and it's like they're speaking as the husband of the wife of this husband and everything like that. But you know, and one thing that I want to just kind of talk on as well, now that we're coming up to Christmas, and you know, for some people, Christmas is a challenging time of the year at the best of times, but it's how do you go about keeping the memory of your dad alive when more people will be like, they're not here, and it is that, again, sorry for your loss, because I truthfully don't feel, my mom's not here physically, and for a long time she was unwell anyway, so like I said, the grieving process was a gradual thing. I don't feel I've lost anything. If anything, I feel that I've got a communion more so now with her, and a communication now more with her than anything else. I've got lots of the physical things around, like she was a prolific crochet, if that's the word. So, you know, my plant pots and altar and everything like that, there's all little bits and pieces of things that she made, and they're painstakingly made, the amount of work that's gone in there. So I don't have this sense of loss really when that comes around, but I know that people will approach me and it'll be the tilted head and you must be feeling I mean, the last Christmas was the first Christmas that was having a Christmas without her being alive, and the sadness, I was wondering how I was going to feel, and it was just like kind of just more curiosity, going like, how am I feeling? How am I feeling? More so than I feel sad. It was like constantly, well, how am I feeling? Because people always tell me that, you know, oh, Christmas is the hardest. That's when you miss them the most. My dad died just after Boxing Day, so Christmas has always had a little bit of a taint to it anyway. So leading up to Christmas, there was the, you know, people approaching and just like, you must be sad, or, you know, I've had messages, it's like, you I feel for you, it must be hard for you on this day, when I don't understand, because having had 2016 where people were losing their minds about people they didn't meet, they'd never met, you know, like public figures, and then me losing someone who was very real in my life, I got a perspective on that. And then when big pivotal days happen, when we're supposed to feel like Christmas, jolly and gay, or if you're missing certain people, you're meant to feel sad.
Yeah.
You don't feel either of those things. It's just kind of how do you feel around periods like that? Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas.
Yeah, I think for me, I think it's birthdays. The funny thing is, okay, we're talking about Christmas, but I'll just talk quickly about the birthday. I remember my dad's last birthday. It was actually coinciding with my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, and because I knew they were gonna go for chemo on that time, so I decided to make a surprise party for the both of them, and it went really, really well. So when his birthday comes up now, I think back to that time when my mom and dad were both smiling, and when there's certain days of the month or something, like whenever every seventh day comes of the month, I'm always feeling, but then now it's much easier. And then for me, Christmas, the thing I like about being bicultural and growing up in Finnish culture is people really respect the spirit of someone who's gone. Because, for example, if it's Father's Day, or there's the All Saints Day, because it's a very Lutheran country and it's the Church of the State. So most people take, whether it's a mother or a father or someone who's passed on, so you take a candle to that person's grave on the day of. So those are those traditions that people do also during Christmas. So during Christmas, it's a tradition. So then what we did last Christmas, I was home for Christmas with my mom because I didn't want her to be, it was the first Christmas and I didn't want her to be alone. So what we did was we just made what my dad really liked for Christmas. And then we left his chair. There, and we put a plate there, even if we knew he wasn't coming. But I mean, just to be like, for my mom to make her feel better. And we visited the grave, we put the candle there, and my mom talked to the grave. Although, yeah, because I know I can communicate if I want to. But anyway, it was just for her to feel better, for her to feel like, that she has this thingy for her to feel better. So when the holidays come, I don't think it's that hard, but I just feel that now that I've spent so much time being present, Christmas actually seems insignificant because, people say, it's the time of the year when you have to be good and you have to help people and you have to be kind. But I'm like, why can't we do that 365 days in a year? Like, why do we have to wait for particular days like Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or whatever to tell someone that you love them or they matter to you? So what I had been doing is that when I'm with my mom, I'd just take her out for lunch and be like, Mom, this is your Mother's Day gift. Like or I'd make her brunch or something, like just to show. And that's what I used to do. Because the thing is, the thing that most people feel, the thing that I feel people should make a tradition of every day of their lives, is to make sure that whoever is in their life, whether it's a friend, whether it's a boyfriend, a partner, family, just let them know that you love them. Let them know that they're loved. Show them, maybe send them little notes here and there. Because at the end of the day, I think Christmas would be harder for me if I hadn't taken that decision to go home. So I feel like if you're going through a hard, tough time, write 10 things that you love about the person who's passed on and honor them in that way. Do something for them. Play their music that they liked. Maybe it'll make you cry. Maybe not. Maybe it'll make you smile. Because there's certain songs that I hear that remind me of my dad. And now, before it was hard, but nowadays I smile with it. Like tears still come, but at least it's not an upside down frown, So I am very, I try to take things as they are. So just honor the person in a way that you can. And if you don't feel like doing anything, that's okay also. But just remember that you are never alone. even if you feel alone, but then you're never alone because you're surrounded by people who have passed before you. You're surrounded by your angels, if you believe in that. You're surrounded by your guides, and everything should be. That's why I tell people, like, just take that time to be present. Just chill. If you don't feel like doing anything, you don't have to feel like you have to do something. If you can just take a walk, if you're able to practice yoga, if you're able to read something, it goes a long way. Or purchase something that they would like, and enjoy that. Just imagine that they're there with you. And that really helps me get through the holidays, because I remember when Father's Day came, because Father's Day in Finland is in November, the second Sunday of November. And I remember I was like, oh, I need to keep myself busy, because it's going to be a hard day for me. And when the day came, I think I spent a little time with my sister, and I'd gone for a walk. And then after the walk, I was like, hey, this wasn't so bad as I thought it would be. So sometimes we think it's going to be bad, but then if you take that step and just keep going on with your routine, because what I decided was that day that I would light a candle I always light a candle for my dad. But I mean, that particular day, it was just that form of gratitude that I had a dad, actually, to miss. Because there are many people who've not had that chance to have, some of them, maybe they don't remember their fathers or anything like that. I was in deep gratitude because at least I had a father that I could miss. And at least I had, because then it made me conscious that, on Mother's Day and all those days and everything, that not everyone has that thing. So I'm like, why am I being so selfish and being like, oh, woe is me. But at the end of the day, I had something that and that is something that I should be grateful for. So gratitude, practice gratitude during the holidays, and imagine that, I'm grateful that I can miss someone. I'm grateful that this person was in my life. I'm grateful that I got to spend time with them. I'm grateful that maybe they imparted to me knowledge, or I'm grateful that some of their imprint, or whoever they were, have somehow brought me to where I am today or something. So that really helps to get through the holidays, and just being positive, positive. Like even last year, like after everything happened, then I decided to send people that I valued, like an email, just to appreciate them, because I was like, whoa, what if something happens? I don't want anyone to ever feel that they weren't important to me when they actually were. So grief, or the holidays, actually make me realize that whoever is in my life is also a gift. And I shouldn't focus on this person who is not physically there and forget about everyone who's around me, because that's what we tend to do. We focus on what's past that we cannot bring back, when we should focus on the people who are already here.
And it's and what you said about Mother's Day and Father's Day in particular, because a birthday is, birthdays are all over the place. But then when you culturally have this day, it's Mother's Day. Father's Day has always been, a thing. And I've never really it's never been a big celebration of Father's Day or anything like that. But Mother's Day, when Mother's Day came around, and it just reframed it in my mind as like, all the cards are coming out and people are walking around with flowers, and restaurants are like Mother's Day special. And I'm just looking at it and going, I've got a mother. And that's as much as it needed to do, because the thing is, I used to joke with my mom as well sometimes. She's like, do you know what day it is? Or do you know what day it is next week? Or something like that, alluding to the fact that it's Mother's Day and all of this stuff would be. And I'd be like, it's Sunday. It's let's not put enormous amounts of importance on one day. For any reason the card doesn't land on the time that you think I'm not making something of it. So when these days come up, it's nice, like you say, to kind of give that focus. But then why just what are you going to do the rest of the 304 days? You're just going to be, and having worked in hospitality, and especially Valentine's Day was always an interesting observation on relationships, because people would drag each other out to these Valentine specials, and you could tell who had a good relationship and who was just out there for the day. The man would walk around and sell them like a solitary rose in cellophane, and if you can't do that every day, don't force it down, don't ram it home on the day that one day isn't going to make it any better. And a lot of the time it's because of the shoulds and the coulds and what we're supposed to do and what we think we're obliged to do, and this big old message of Christmas, be happy. It's not like that for some people. Some people it's a really contemplative time, and appreciation from a level of just deep contemplation. And that's how my first Christmas without my mum in physical form was. It was just like, okay, I'm supposed to be feeling this. There was other stuff going on for me to be distracted by, but the memory of her was just, it wasn't that caused the issue around Christmas. It was Christmas and all the other things that Christmas brings. Sometimes, that's a completely different conversation anyway. I want to ask you just like the general questions. As you know, HER stands for higher energetic resonance. When you feel that you're most HER, and who then represents HER to you?
I would say when I felt most HER would be when I am, meditating or just in solitude. But then I realized that I'm not separate from that. So I feel the most HER when I am out there giving people joy, because I like, if, for example, I'm taking a walk with my nephew and we're in this forest and I see him, the joy that he has having a squirrel take a nut from his hand, and just seeing his joy. So I feel like I'm most HER when I'm present and in the moment, and not trying to make something of that's not there. When I'm able to be there for people, and when I'm able to be there for myself with self-care, because self-care to me is 100% important. And one thing that I'm learning is spiritual cleansing is as important as brushing your teeth, So that's when I feel I'm most HER.
Who do you feel represents HER?
There are so many people, but the person I feel represents HER is Mariam Hasna. She is, if you look for her on Instagram, she's vibrational medicine. She's a mystic, and I love that she keeps growing, and I like her because she acknowledges where she's now and where she has come from. And I like that she talks of vibration and self-care and how it should be a ritual, that you should be conscious of the energy that you have presently, and try and check what it's try to perceive what it's trying to tell you. And I think that is the most important thing, to have someone to remind you that, yes, I'm not like 100, because like most people, it's like they want someone who's like embodies something, but I don't want someone who's perfect to embody her. I want someone who's becoming and keeps destroying that like, oh yeah, that used to be me, but now I'm a different person, who keeps destroying and reconstructing, not distracting. Destroying sounds negative. Who keeps reconstructing themselves, because I feel like we keep shifting. So for someone to acknowledge that they keep shifting, that this is the thought that they had when they're at this stage and whatever. So for me, Mariam Hasna embodies that.
And do you have any self-care ritual? You talked about spiritual cleansing. Is that your favorite self-care practice?
Yes, I try to do it every day. The first self-care spiritual practice before the spiritual cleansing is meditation. And I always start with gratitude and then move on to my I am affirmations. And if I feel called to write, I write it out. Meditation has gotten me through stress, insomnia, anger, and grief, as I've told you about. And then yoga, because it first started as a way to manage my illness. And now I find it a fitting practice because it's made me learn patience, self-love, and honoring my body. Because I realized with yoga, because before I used to want to be a certain size, like you see as women, like we see so many images that our bodies are not good enough. Like we're always told our bodies are not good enough. I started to love each and every love handle. Yoga brings that self-love and self-awareness. So yoga is one of the practices. And it helps me let go of things that do not serve me. And my most favorite is long walks in the forest, because when I'm out there, I feel connected to the ground below me, the trees, and I'm aware of the synergy. It allows me to remember that I'm part of this creation and not separate from it, and increases my awareness of gratitude, because gratitude is above all else like the base of my self-care. And the other day, I had a Mary Poppins moment where I was feeding squirrels and birds off my hand, and that makes me feel like really I'm one with nature. But when I'm traveling, for example, when I'm at my mother's place, because there's certain things that I'm like, there's no forest to go to, so my spiritual cleansing would be my sea salt bath. So I collect herbs from the garden and drop them in water. And then there's just that, I don't know how to explain it. Like when you get out, there's that feeling of, you just feel like everything is just washed away. Mm-hmm. And now my other self-care practices now that I've started is every second month, I take a week off social media completely, just to de-stress and to make myself aware of, and to have clarity, because I think, like I said, we're so engaged that sometimes we just need to disconnect. And I noticed a big difference with my productivity, that actually how social media has become such a necessity in our lives, but at the same time, it also becomes a distraction because you feel the need to always reply to messages and to be present for other people, but then not for yourself.
Mm-hmm. And what's the best piece of advice a woman has ever given to you?
That's funny you should ask me. Actually, the person who gave me the best advice is your first guest, Miss Alexis Jones. Mm. And because when I met her, she was my life coach. So she used to tell me when I didn't achieve something or I felt like I was really angry, she said, do not let your expectations prevent you from doing or reaching your goals. And one thing she said, when I was scared of embracing my spirituality and I was scared of embracing other things. So she's like, do not be afraid to embrace your truth. And to me, that has just been the basis of the things that I do, that I remember not to have expectations and to just go with the flow and see what happens, and things happen when they happen, and to always speak my truth, even if it feels hard. Or like I remember even having that conversation that I didn't really want to celebrate Christmas. So just honoring my truth and also accepting other people's truth and not being annoyed by the way that they do things.
Yeah, just to mention, because we keep referring to Alexis during the course of this conversation, but Alexis is on episode 2, and she is a psychic medium friend of ours that we both have in common. And through Alexis as well, she's given me great insight. I've had readings with Alexis prior to Mum passing, and then spoken to her since as well. And she was able at one point to kind of say that she saw my mum at different points. When my mum had just passed, maybe about 2 months or so, and it was before I went to India, she connected to my mum. She saw her in a place. She was just kind of in a very holding place where she was waiting for something, and her guides and everyone were just kind of giving her a moment to acclimatize to the fact that she wasn't physical anymore. And she was just sitting in a space in a garden, drinking tea, reading a book, which is probably the Bible, knowing my mum, and then interestingly, when I was out in India, I remember there was one day that I sat and I journaled because I was prompted by an angel card that I plucked from one of my fellow travelers' deck. And it had said, and it was about mediumship. The message was basically sit down and communicate with them however you want to, because they'll be able to hear you. And my way of communicating was sitting down and just writing a letter to her. And it took me a couple of days because it was just like, whoa, this is too real, to actually sit down and do it. Then I did, and the time that I sat down and did it, and it was just like, okay, I'm going to do this now, stream of consciousness thing, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and tears came and writing came, And that kind of, when I was done with it, I was like, okay, I've said my piece now. And it was nothing negative. It was like, this is how I feel. This is, you know, maybe we misunderstood here. I didn't understand this about you. I don't think you understood this about me. Just that conversation that I've always wanted to have. And interestingly, then when I was speaking to Alexis just earlier, before we recorded her interview this year, she said that time that she asked me a question. She said, when you were out in India, did you write a letter to your mom in your journal? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, she was there with you. And it was just that whole kind of like 360 full validation of, they're never that far. They're always there when you want to call, when you want to communicate. And that's how I know I have, you know, I've got that Kundalini practice that I'm really working through now. And that's helped me. I think had I not had that and the meditations that I'm able to go into, a lot of the meditations that I'm doing within Kundalini are very powerful. And a lot of it is about clearing past trauma, clearing karmic patterns. Because when I look at my family, I'm very much the one that has gone, it stops right now. I'm not going to repeat behaviors or situations or illnesses, but it takes work. You know, it might not be done in my lifetime, but I don't want to repeat certain things. And a lot gets thrown up in all of these meditations, but I feel it's, like you said before, it's allowing me to release something. And during a period of time, sometimes it can be heavy. It can be a lot where you're just like, man, all I can do is have a shower and go lie down and not really do that much else today, and just let me, it's exhausting sometimes. But I'm grateful. When you're saying gratitude, I'm grateful that I have that, where that practice came into my life at the right time. And the people that I'm working with and can reach out to, and the fact that I can have true and honest conversations about how I'm feeling without it being dismissed, or without there being any expectation of where I should be X amount of months after, or what I should have gone through, or how I should have been showing. You know, I've had people say to me, well, I've not really seen you cry. Sometimes I don't feel like that, you know. And normally I don't feel like that in a public space.
Yeah.
When I do that, I've never been like a public crier on any description unless something is really touching. Usually I cry out of frustration in public more than sorrow. But it's when I'm having quiet times and communicating with her through that practice that the emotion will come up, and it will come up like a wave. And then it comes out, then it's like, okay, maybe it's not going to take me like a million years to get over it, because in speaking to other people, their grief takes longer, but they have different modes of doing it. And like you say, and like we all agree, there's no right or wrong way, but I think there is a way that is beneficial for yourself, especially when you're doing self-care. You can be strong for people, but you have to be strong for yourself. And sometimes being strong for yourself isn't sitting in pain and trauma. Not to say that people who are walking around sad all the time are doing it for any external validation, but I don't enjoy feeling heavy and sad and all the rest of it. It doesn't mean that I don't feel those things, but it
doesn't serve you.
I allow them to move. Whereas other people might suppress them at any point. It's like, oh my God, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this. And suppress it by using whatever means, food, drink, television, shopping, gambling, whatever you're using to kind of keep that in the service. And then you're using all of your energy just to suppress this thing that will then come out as all manners of stuff. You start getting sick, you know? Whereas if you just let it go through for that few 5 minutes, 10 minutes, one day, you're going to feel rotten as it moves through, but then once it's gone, you're free of it. Instead of constantly miss this person, you're talking about that, and they're just standing right next to you, going, "I'm not gone." It's just finding a way of communicating. But I really want to say to you, thank you for having this conversation with me on Her Conversation, because, like, you know, I think it's been cathartic for us both, but it's because it's one of those subjects that is so taboo for some reason. Frustratingly, it gets, people want to talk about it, or at least you want to hear someone else having a conversation that relates to what you've been through. And I hope by other people listening to this that they can take some sort of comfort knowing that what they're going through, the confusion, the hurt, the being pissed off at people not understanding you or saying stupid things or not saying the right thing, or it's all good, it's all right. It's, these are, no one can read your mind, and sometimes maybe one of the things that we need to do in our grief is kind of request what we need.
Yeah. And then the thing is, like, we need to remember that people meet you where they are, actually. So even if, because there's some people, even if you try to explain, they don't understand because they think that they have the best of intentions. But then that's the thing, they're embracing their truth, but they don't want to embrace or respect your truth and how you're feeling. So the thing that I would tell people is just be conscious about how you relate, or just ask someone, how would you like me to communicate with you? Like, what do you prefer? When my dad was ill and I bumped into someone and I told her, look, we don't have to talk about my dad's illness or anything. What I would like is some normalcy and not to be surrounded by illness. And that's the same thing. My dad passed on. I didn't want to talk about him all the time because at that time the tears would just come and I couldn't help it. But then now it's more like, if someone talks about cancer, like in October, I kind of, like, I just switch off, because I just can't stand seeing those advertisements and those pink ribbons and stuff. I feel like snipping them and whatever, and wearing pink. Yeah, you've worn pink, and so what? So what's happening now? Because there are also other diseases that people do not know about. That still also, every disease, either way, affects us. So like, there's, everything is important. There's no disease that's lesser than the other, because now we're coming to December. Like, December 1st is supposed to be World's AIDS Day. So I mean, like, the same thing, like same concept, wearing a red ribbon. Because I remember once we had a red ribbon and I was like, what have I done? What have I done? Like, I always ask myself, what have I done to earn my place to wear this thing? Because I feel like it should be earned, not just, and sometimes people should also be conscious to where they're putting their money. Like, are they really doing what they're doing? Thank you so much for having me. And I'm just going to tell the audience that you don't know how much work she has put in this podcast, and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm so honored to be a guest on her conversations. It is just my soul family, my soul sister, soul friend. It's a beautiful thing. So I'm just grateful. I'm sitting in gratitude right now that I was able to, and honored that you asked me to be on this podcast. And I hope that what we spoke about will somehow help you in your journey. If you're going through grief or you're going through loneliness, that just remember that you're never alone, ever, even if it feels like you are. Just know that you're surrounded by something bigger than you. If you ever feel alone, just find a space where you can just de-stress and just be quiet, even if it's for 1 minute. It really makes a big difference. So always remember, self-care is important, 100%. 100%. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people.
So I just want to say thank you again to Donna for joining me on this very different episode of her conversations, but in its difference it does have its relevance and importance. And the first one, I did want to have someone who would be prepared to kind of just go there with me, and Donna was the perfect person to do so. Just also to let you know as well that Donna does her own work, and you can find her online at momversation.com. That's Momversation as in conversation with a C. Donna is a mind shift coach. She's an intuitive. She has her own podcast, and she is also a certified wino. So you can find her on all the social media at Momversation, and on Instagram at Just Monversation. Back to myself, if you need to get in contact with me, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Casmics, at CAZMICK, and my website is carolmaywhittick.com, so CarolMaywhittick.com. So until the next one, hit subscribe just so that you make sure you can get this on your preferred device, on your preferred channel, as and when each new episode gets uploaded. And also, if you're feeling that what we discussed in this episode could help somebody through a situation that they're going through, please feel free to share and forward these episodes to them or direct them to one of the channels that I use. So until the next time, take care. Thank you.